It's Thursday night. It is time for the Prosperity Report Live. Welcome to all of you who are tuning in. Thank you for joining us today for the Prosperity Report Live. I had a busy day today on the campaign trail. I had a radio interview with a radio station in Chester County. I also had a television interview that will be coming out sometime in September with PCN. So a lot of traveling today. I made it home just in time for the Prosperity Report Live. There was a little bit of a detour on just before I got home. Otherwise, the travels were great today. I had a few things to talk about from the campaign this week. First, we had Dave McCormick not knowing where Philadelphia was, or mistaking Philadelphia, Mississippi for Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I don't blame him. He is from Connecticut, after all, and why would somebody from Connecticut know the difference between Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and Philadelphia, Mississippi? But yeah, he tweeted out a story from Philadelphia, Mississippi, and made implied that it was something that took place here in Pennsylvania. So, like I said, though, you can't blame him. The guy's from Connecticut. But on the plus side for Dave McCormick, he started to go on the offensive this week with all of the cute names that Bob Casey uses for inflation. Of course, Bob Casey has been talking about greedflation. He's been talking about streamflation. He's been talking about shrinkflation. But there is already a word that covers all of those things, and that word is, of course, inflation. Those are all symptoms of inflation. Those are all things that happen because of the endless money printing that they have been doing in Washington, D.C. So Dave McCormick has coined the term Bobflation because Bob Casey has been part of the D.C. establishment for almost 16 years. And he, as far as I am aware, has never voted against any of this endless money printing. So it was a good term. It was a good term that Dave McCormick coined for Bob Casey. However, McCormick seems to miss the fact that some of the biggest money printing happened not under Biden, but under Trump. Well, I shouldn't say not under Biden, because it did happen under Biden, but it also happened under Trump. Both parties love to print money. They love to print money because then they don't have to defend tax increases. And for the most part, people don't like tax increases. But that gets me to one of the issues I did want to talk about today, and that is a brand new tax. And it's not an inflation tax. It's a new tax proposed by Harris. So Kamala Harris wants to have a tax on unrealized capital gains. So what are unrealized capital gains? Capital gains is whenever an asset that you own goes up in value. An unrealized capital gains is it goes up in value according to the market, but you didn't sell it. So you didn't realize the capital gains. So imagine that you bought your home 20 years ago for $50,000. Let's imagine now your home is worth $150,000. You're still living in your home. You did not sell your home. You don't have, so you have a quote capital gain of $100,000. You don't have that $100,000 though. It's not in your bank account. It's just your home went up in value according to the market. It went up in value by $100,000. That doesn't even mean you can sell your home today for $150,000. It's just been appraised at $150,000. So that means you've had an unrealized capital gains of $100,000. Let's say now the government wants to tax that at 25%, which is what Harris is proposing. That means you who bought a home for $50,000 and that home is now worth $150,000 owe a tax bill of $25,000, even though you don't have $25,000 to pay that tax bill. So what does that mean? I guess it means you have to sell your home. And of course, if this is across the board, lots of people will be selling their homes at the beginning of the tax season. So let's say at the end of 2025, your home is worth $150,000. But at the beginning of 2026, because everyone needs to sell their home to pay this Kamala tax, lots of new homes enter the market. The home prices crash. You can only sell your home for $100,000 to BlackRock because no one can afford homes because everyone's paying this insane tax. So BlackRock gets your home for $100,000. You are homeless and you owe the IRS $25,000. Congratulations. This is how unrealized capital gains taxes work. Now, to be fair, Harris did say this would only apply to billionaires. But those of us who have studied history know that this is exactly how the income tax started. The income tax was only supposed to apply to the wealthy elite, those who in today's dollars would be making $1 million a year or more. Did it stay that way? Of course not. What happens is once they get the foot in the door for a new tax, they expand it. Government always expands it. That's why it's important to study history and not just a list of presidents, not just a list of battles, but also economic history. It's very important that we study economic history so we know these things, so that we know that the history of taxation is that government always finds new routes for new taxation. So be careful with that. We don't want that. We do not want a unrealized capital gains tax, even if it's only on billionaires, because in a few years you will be part of that class that's taxed. Also, we never know how bad inflation's going to get. $1 billion at some point might only be worth a cup of coffee, and then we're all billionaires and we're all paying the billionaire capital gains tax. So let's not raise taxes, whether it be inflation tax, which we've been talking about a lot on the program, or this new capital gains tax. Another thing I wanted to talk about was something that Kamala Harris proposed, and that is, and Bob Casey has hinted at this even before Kamala Harris proposed it, and that is banning price gouging at the national level. So what is price gouging? Well, there's no clear definition of it. It's just when prices go up. And whenever you print a lot of money, prices go up. So I guess you could say any increase in price could be could be considered a price gouging. But traditionally, price gouging has been when people raise their prices or companies raise their prices following a disaster. So what disaster are we experiencing right now? Oftentimes price gouging is, people are accused of price gouging following an earthquake or following a hurricane. I guess this disaster that we're accusing people of price gouging is the disaster of the Biden-Harris administration. And that is a disaster. I'm not going to kid you. That is indeed a disaster. But I'm not sure that it's the type of disaster that we tend to think about when we think about price gouging. So what is is it okay to price gouge? And I am going to take the very unpopular position that price gouging, even in a real disaster, is perfectly fine. In fact, it's desirable. We want people to be able to raise prices even in a disaster, because that gives us the outcomes that are best. They're the best outcomes to deal with a disaster. So let's think about it this way. Let's say that there was a hurricane. And let's say that hurricane took out a major water treatment plant, and now water is scarce in this region that's hit by a hurricane. And let's say that companies are allowed to price gouge. And so now a bottle of water is going for $6 in an area where bottled water is desperately needed. This sounds terrible, but let's think about without prices. Let's pretend like there are no prices in the economy, and let's say what needs to happen if a major water treatment plant is hit by a hurricane. There are two things we want to happen. We want people to consume less water, right? There's a limited supply of fresh water now. We want people to cut back on the amount of water that they're consuming. And two, we want people to bring more water into the market. Those are the two things that we desire. What does higher prices cause people to do with the water situation? Well, first, I'm going to consume less water. If water is $6 per bottle, I am not going to run out, dump it over my head as if I'm Triple H in the WWE. I'm going to take precious care of this water because it's costing me $6 a bottle. So I'm going to consume less. That's exactly what we want to happen. I'm not going to be washing my car with fresh water because water is now expensive. And we want people to consume less. We also want new supply of water to come on the market. Well, if I live a state over from where this people are now getting $6 per bottle of water, I might be willing to drive to the next state so I could sell this water that I can pick up at Walmart for $3 for a 24-pack. Actually, it's more expensive than that now. It was like $3 for a 24-pack like 5 years ago. Then something happened, and now it's a lot more expensive. But you get the point. Like, I would be willing to drive water. I might even be able to rent a U-Haul truck, load it up with water, go into that area, sell it, because now I'm getting $6 per bottle of water. But guess what? I'm not going to be the only person doing that. Other people are going to be doing that as well. So we're going to get truckloads and truckloads of people who are willing to drive across state lines and sell this bottled water. So those two things that we said we wanted to happen, we wanted people to cut back on their consumption, happens because of, quote, price gouging. And the other thing we wanted to see happen were new supplies coming into the area. And that happens because of, guess what? Price gouging. So if you don't want to see people suffering throughout this, if you want to see the supply go up in areas that are affected by hurricanes, then what you want to happen is you want prices to be able to fluctuate. You want people to be able to, or organizations or companies to be able to raise their prices. We all experienced empty shelves at the beginning of COVID. Remember whenever you couldn't buy toilet paper at the store? You went into the store and the toilet paper aisle was completely empty. If companies felt safe to be able to raise the price of toilet paper, then your Aunt Selma would not be loading up her trunk with toilet paper at the beginning of 2020. If they were charging $10 per roll for toilet paper at the beginning of 2020, Aunt Selma would buy her one roll to get her through until prices came back down. And then we would not see empty shelves. Allowing prices to rise is good for the economy. It is how we get a sufficient supply of the goods that people need into the hands of the people who need those goods. Does it stink to pay $10 for a roll of toilet paper? Yes, I do not want to pay $10 for a roll of toilet paper. But what stinks even more is not having toilet paper. If we don't have toilet paper, then we might literally become stinky. So that really does stink. So it's much better to allow for price gouging. These ideas that are being proposed on mainly from the left right now, but in whenever disasters happen, not the disaster of the Biden-Harris administration, but natural disasters, when those disasters happen, you see both Republicans and Democrats start to criticize organizations for price gouging. And I wish we would stop doing that, because that actually is a good thing for the economy. Disasters, we don't like disasters. Disasters hurt us. But one of the ways to alleviate that pain is to allow prices to fluctuate. So those were two things that I wanted to talk about. The best way to bring prosperity to Pennsylvania right now is to turn off the endless money printing machine. Don't raise taxes on hardworking Pennsylvanians through new taxation, which would be a capital gains tax or more inflation. And finally, stay away from laws against price gouging. We have them at the local levels in some places. Unfortunately, we have them at local levels. We definitely don't need them at a national level. And that's what Bob Casey's proposing. That's what Kamala Harris is proposing. We don't want that, but we do have an alternative. We have John Thomas for U.S. Senate. You can vote for John Thomas, a guy from Pennsylvania who's not whacked out crazy on economics, recognizes that prices serve a function. So send a message to Washington, D.C. that we don't want socialist solutions to government-caused problems. So that's it. Thanks for joining us tonight for the Prosperity Report Live. Remember, I try to come to you every Thursday night, even whenever I have to kind of rush home to get you here. I want to give you the content that you desire. So Thursday nights at 9 o'clock, join us live, or you can catch us on Spotify or on YouTube. I normally get the episodes out the day after. So on Friday, you can normally see an episode of our show every Friday on YouTube or on Spotify. If you have any comments or suggestions, include them in the chat. And we'll see you next week for another episode of the Prosperity Report Live. Thank you for joining us, ladies and gentlemen.